You're listening to the Real Estate Runway podcast, powered by Quattro Capital, where we are all about alternative business and investment strategies to help you amplify life and maximize wealth. Here's your host, the recovering engineer turned multifamily investor, Chad Sutton.
In today's episode, I'm very excited to introduce my coach, Trevor McGregor. He is a Master Platinum coach, has a history of coaching with Tony Robbins, is known as the real estate guy in the coaching world. Trevor and I are going to have a great conversation about what are the 5 things that are generally preventing entrepreneurs and high performers from achieving what they want to achieve. There are 5 simple things, and I guarantee no matter where you are in life, one of these will resonate with you. Here's Trevor McGregor. All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. Y'all, I am so excited to introduce my mentor, one of the most talented coaches that I've ever had the privilege of working with, Trevor McGregor. Trevor, how are you doing today?
Oh, Chad, thank you so much. I'm blessed and grateful. How are you, my man?
Doing well. Blessed as always. You know, it's fun playing at this level in this game and things of that sort, and blessed to be hosting another podcast with you, sir.
Well, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be on, and I appreciate the job that you're doing. And, you know, the entire team Quattro is truly a treat to know and to work with, and I'm just excited to be here.
You know, I'm excited to have you on the show today, Trevor. I mean, you have done wonders working with us and kind of helping us get out of our own way, right? I mean, it's one thing to be a high performer. It's one thing to have lofty goals and ambitions and dreams, but a lot of people just simply can't get out of their own way, right? So I'm really excited for some of the meat we'll get into today on how you help people get out of their own way and the main reasons people don't succeed at what they're going after. But before we do that, you have such an amazing laundry list of credentials. I would love you to just open that floodgate and tell these guys who you are. And let's start there.
Well, thank you. And yeah, I'll try to keep it short, although I don't know if it can be short. But yes, my name is Coach Trevor McGregor. I am a real estate investor and a Master Platinum coach. My background was in corporate, similar to what a lot of people do. They go out there and study business in university, got a job, worked in corporate, and then, you know, really went on to move through the ranks because I was really driven by money and really driven by climbing that corporate ladder. To really speak to what my big episode was, is I literally had a chance to put some money into this company I was working for in their expansion plan. I scraped together all of my savings, cashed in my 401k, Chad, and I even convinced my own parents to take out a 6-figure second mortgage on the family home, and I dumped it all into this big expansion. And for the first year and a half, it really went well. And then, you know, from there, it didn't, and it all imploded. And to make a long story short, I was literally, 31 years old, and I had lost everything. And, I was married, had 2 kids at the time, and I really got into a really dark place because I wasn't sure how I was going to, pay back all of the, people and, start building my life again, let alone, tell my parents I just lost all that money. So what does anyone do when they're down and out? Well, you seek guidance. And thank God for me, I found a coach. And that coach said, Trevor, you're still a young guy. You're married, 2 kids. You got to get up, dust yourself off and keep on going. And I said, yeah, but I don't know how I'm going to do it. And he said one thing that changed my entire life. And he said, have you ever thought of investing in real estate? I said, real estate? I don't know anything about real estate. He said, well, you can literally use other people's money, go out there and buy a property, fix it up, either rent it or sell it or refinance it and keep doing it. And so, Chad, honestly, my back was up against the wall. That's exactly what I did. I went and bought my first little property. That was a townhouse. That was a good experience. And we were seeing tremendous appreciation. Took the money out of that, bought a condo, did the same thing there, moved on and bought my first duplex. And that's when I discovered what cash flow really was. And once you discover cash flow, you want to go out there and buy more of them. So I bought more duplexes, more fourplexes, and it went on and on and on. And literally within about 2.5 years, not only did I pay off all of my failed loans, including my parents, but I had a beautiful cash flowing portfolio, on the other side of it. And that's really, really where I started to help other people get into real estate. So that's the short version of a long story. Does that make sense?
It makes 100% sense. And I got to imagine that, having the perseverance to start from what I guess you might consider as rock bottom at that point and go another path and rebuild all the way to where you were able to get to in 2.5 years. I mean, that took some gusto. Yeah.
It really did. And again, I have to thank my coach, because without him, I don't even know where I'd be, because the story gets even better from there, that as I started to buy even more real estate, my son's soccer coach, my other son's baseball coach, they'd come to me and they'd say, Trevor, how are you doing all of this? I mean, how are you buying all this property? And I'd say, well, I'd be happy to show you and your wife. Let's sit down. And Chad, I literally started to share this blueprint that I had with other people. And as they started to not only learn it, but apply it, I mean, they started to go out there and buy their first rental property. Then next thing you know, they had 2, then they had 3, then they'd tell their neighbor, then their neighbor would be calling me up. And I think that's when the coaching bug bit. And I was working with my own, Tony Robbins coach at the time that all this was happening. And he said, Trevor, you're so passionate about real estate. You're so passionate about people. You got this corporate background. You've lost money. You've made money. Tony Robbins is looking to expand his business division of coaching. Would you ever think of maybe putting in a resume? And I thought, well, there's no way I'd ever, work for Tony, or there's no way they'd even select my resume. I've got no coaching experience. And he kept telling me, just put in the resume, just put in the resume. So I did. And believe it or not, I was shortlisted from 500 resumes down to 250, 250 down to 100, 100 down to 50. And even when you get that, doesn't mean that you're going to get to go and be a Tony Robbins coach, but you got to go to all of his events. You got to read all the books. You got to listen to all the audios. And literally I did that for about 18 months. And when the dust settled, I got to go do a live practicum in front of Tony's executive team in Orlando, Florida. And when the dust settled, I got offered a position. And yes, I went on to work for the man, the myth, the legend, Tony Robbins, for 5 years as one of his, master platinum coaches.
That is absolutely incredible. So not only did you pick yourself up out of the ashes, right? Yeah. You discovered a calling, right? And you had a talent that at that point, that was your most recent business success. You also had your losses that your losses give you credibility, right? I mean, it can't always be sunshine and roses. You've been on both sides of that table. And then you got into this wonderful world of coaching where you've helped people such as my team, Quattro Capital, and many others other big names that I know we would know out there today in the real estate field. So that is a great segue into getting into the meat of some of this presentation or this podcast rather. What are some of the areas that you find entrepreneurs of any sort are in their own way?
Well, it's a great question. And I think that I've been blessed to have had the failure, had the success, gone on from some of that single family stuff to do more multifamily, which I do now. I'm literally doing some active stuff here in my hometown, but passively investing all over the US and not just in multifamily syndications, but self-storage. We bought a hemp farm in Colorado last year, bought into a luxury resort in Costa Rica. My wife and I do some work with a modular builder down in Sydney, Australia. So not only have I had failure, success, been able to go out there and do all this stuff in real estate, is I've had the blessing, Chad, to now have coached over 25,000 coaching calls with people that are either in business or in real estate. So I've been given a unique peek at really what allows people to achieve phenomenal success, but also what allows people to stay stuck or even fail. And so I always like to, share some of that with the listeners and the viewers, because I boiled it down to what I call the 5 simple things that are preventing anybody from scaling in real estate. So I'd be happy to go over those with you now.
That's great. I've already got my notepad out. My first finger's up. Let's go.
You got it, bro. Well, let's hit the first one, and I'll be just absolutely straight up. Most people don't think this is their number one, but for most people, it truly is. And that is what we call number 1, limiting beliefs. That is, if you don't think you can, or if you think it's too competitive, or you think it's too hard, or you don't think you're going to be able to raise capital, right? Goes back to that Henry Ford quote. If you think you can, you can. And if you think you can't, you're right? So we got to get the cobwebs out of people's minds and start to really work on what they can be at cause of. And there's a whole bunch of other things that go into shifting mindset, shifting perspective, shifting identity. But that's the first thing that I do with anybody, is we start by getting crystal clear and eliminating any limiting beliefs. Does that make sense?
It does. And that's really the first part of mindset, right? Is getting out of your own way with limiting beliefs and thinking about what is holding you back from taking action. I've seen people, and I'm sure you've looked at many of your students this way as well. I've seen people who have gone through years of education on a topic and never taken action because they don't believe that they can get past whatever limiting belief they have. Maybe it's they can't raise capital. Maybe it's, well, I'm not rich enough to do this. Or maybe it's I'm not as smart as Elon Musk. I could never design a Tesla, whatever that is, right?
Yeah, for a lot of people, it's I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm not educated enough, I'm overeducated. And so, different people run into these roadblocks. But again, at the end of the day, it's like Napoleon Hill says that the mind will conceive and believe what it can achieve, but you got to go in that order. You got to absolutely own it first and then go out and take what we call the intelligent and the inspired action. Otherwise, anything that we're learning is just theory. And there's a great thing that says if it were just information alone, every librarian in the US would be a multimillionaire. And
That's
they're
right.
not. It's the application of the information. Does that make sense?
It does. And you see behind me a big bookshelf of lots of texts. And you know what? I have texts from astrophysics and things from my background. I'm not an astrophysicist at all. I don't know that stuff. Just because I have the information doesn't mean I've applied it, right?
I love it. And that really takes us to number 2. And number 2 is really what we call a lack of a strategic plan, because we can get rid of your limiting beliefs, but if you don't really start with the end in mind, if you don't really get crystal clear on where you want to go, how are you going to get there? Because once we know where you want to go in what we call the short term, that might be the next year or two. And the long term, that might be the next, 3, 4, 5 years. Anything beyond that, Chad, is what we call your vision for your business and your life. So we don't make a business plan for the next 10 years, but what we do is we get started with what the vision is, and then we reverse engineer that to the next 5 years, the next 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we engineer a plan to get you moving in the next 30, 60, 90 days, maybe the first year. But that's really number 2. Does that resonate with you?
It does. So let's talk about that for just a second, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm a planner, right? But I hate very, very detailed plans. I know a lot of people have trouble. You don't think you need, like, okay, my goals are this, right? People have trouble translating goals to a strategic plan. And they think, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, Z this year. And then they're frustrated when 6 months in, they haven't accomplished anything, right? So how important is it to get as minute as the daily plan, the weekly plan, the monthly plan? Like, how far down do you think that strategic plan needs to be broken down practically for someone to make that work?
Well, it's a great question. I appreciate you asking, because you always start, with what we call the high level overview. If picture yourself in a hot air balloon over your favorite city, you're going to have perspective, right? And it's that perspective that you might need to ask, well, what class of, real estate do you want to be in? Do you want to be doing it with yourself, or do you want to have a partner, right? Do you want to look at different markets, say Texas or Florida, or do you want to look in the Pacific Northwest? And so there are a lot of questions that you want to start asking yourself in terms of, who are you? What's your skill set? How would another partner like the Quattro partners, support your outcomes? There's all of these questions. And as you get lower and lower, it's like that hot air balloon starts to come lower and lower and lower, where you do get a little bit more granular about, what needs to be done sooner than later, or what's a priority over something else based on what the overarching plan is. And so a lot of people don't start with that 50,000 foot view, and they're almost staring at themselves in the mirror going, gosh, where do I start? Well, that's not healthy. We want you to start by getting a bigger picture, and then we'll start to bring that balloon down and get clear on what needs to happen in the near term.
Absolutely. So what's number 3?
Well, number 3 is one of my favorites. And if we've got number 1 is limiting beliefs, number 2 is, lack of a strategic plan. Number 3 is also super important, and that is a lack of systems for support. Because here's the truth. You can't go out there and just wing it today. You've got to have people, you've got to have systems, structure, technology to support your outcomes. Otherwise, you're probably just going out there and reinventing the wheel every day. And sometimes the wheel turns and sometimes it gets stuck. So I find that people that are defiantly committed to their outcomes will start to, build their teams. They'll start to look at roles and responsibilities within the teams. They'll look at things like deal flow, capital raising, underwriting, running the assets, all of the things that literally go into the outcome. Does that resonate with you?
It resonates incredibly well. And I want to poke on this one for just a second, because surprise, you know me very well. You've coached me for a while. This is one of my favorite areas is strategic systems or supporting systems. And I'm cheating a little bit because I know what number 4 is, right? But then guys, I paid my coaching fees to get to number 4, right? So I get to have that information. But when we're talking about supporting systems, I mean, the whole idea there is it leads into the next one, but we're talking about should you be doing this work? Should someone else be doing this work? There's a concept of who, not how there, right? That's a very good book. Everyone needs to go read if you're an entrepreneur. It's called Who, Not How. I forget the author, but you can look it up.
It's Dan Sullivan with Dr.
Sullivan.
Benjamin Hardy. Easily, thank you for bringing it up, Chad. I know that you've fallen in love with that book, Who, Not How. But it really speaks to the fact that, you know what, we're not meant to be doing all of the different things ourselves, that there's probably somebody that's better at something than what you're good at. And I bet you're good at something that someone else is better at. And I think you're a perfect example of this, you know, with your background in corporate and your engineering mind and your ability to, you know, underwrite as one of the best underwriters that I know and coached in my entire lifetime. Huge props to you. You get it. That's your jam. That's the thing you love. That's the thing that, you know, you're still creating better systems on top of your systems that are already better than 99% of other people out there. And I know that process will continue for you. Whereas maybe you're not out there, you know, raising capital as much as maybe some of the other Quattro partners.
That's right.
So different strokes for different folks. And I say you should be aware of all the different components that go into building a beautiful real estate, you know, empire. But again, I like to have people stay in their own lanes and really drive in those.
That's exactly right. And coming, you know, bringing it back to where we'll go into number 4, there is the concept of the who of supporting systems, but also the system itself. Sometimes it makes sense to make a system. Sometimes it makes sense to build a team, right? And they're not always mutually exclusive. So love that. Let's go to number 4, because I think I've already kind of given it away, but.
Oh yeah. Well, number 4 is my favorite, and just going to say it the way it is. And that is number 4, guys, is poor time management. Poor time management. There's this thing that I teach called the rule of 168. Now, if you're not familiar with what that means, it means that all of us have 168 hours a week to do what we do. Now, we sleep for some of those, we eat, we pay the bills, we play with the kids. But if you're not crystal clear on what your high impact, high income activities are, you're really fooling yourself. If you're not familiar with where you're stronger, whether that's working in the mornings, the afternoons, the nights, the weekends, I mean, everyone's got their sweet spot. And so the way that we coach, teach, mentor, and train on this is through something called the productivity pyramid, where we get clear on what you're doing that is really low value, what you're doing that might be low dollar value, and then we kick it into high gear with high dollar value and high lifetime value. And I won't share anything more than that, but man, it is an amazing system to help people get perspective on what they're doing with their time every week. What do you think, Chad?
I'm laughing about it because you know to what extent I took that productivity pyramid, and I won't go into too much detail with what I did, but basically my calendar has many colors on it and all that sort of stuff, right? So
yeah, you really ran with that. And again, huge props to Chad Sutton, because you don't just like learning this stuff, you like taking it to the nth degree. And for that, I honor you.
Yeah, personal systems, right? The number 3 was supporting systems. Personal productivity systems are part of that.
That's it.
So, Coach, bring it home. What's number 5?
Well, you know what this is, Chad. I mean, you and the Quattro teams do such a good job of this, but number 5 has 3 parts to it. So the first part is really what we call lack of execution, right? Lack of execution. 5B would be lack of, progress, benchmarks, where if you don't have benchmarks to measure your progress against, you're fooling yourself. And then number 3 is really a lack of accountability. So let's dive into those. So number 5A was really, something that I call, if you're not out there taking intelligent and inspired action every day, making the calls, talking to brokers, driving neighborhoods, speaking to investors, really talking to property managers, you're really not a real estate investor, right? So you got to go out there and take action. 5B is really, you've got to have benchmarks. That is, how are you measuring progress? When are you measuring progress? To what are you using as units of measurement, right? Some people might call that a number of calls per day, or a number of, investors you get in front of per week, or whatever. But, with my clients, I like to have, tried and true benchmarks so that they can go out there and have something to measure against. And then number 3 is a big one, obviously, as a high performance coach and having done over 25,000 calls right now, I know statistically that if you have somebody holding your feet to the fire, like a coach, helping you do what you say you're going to do and keeping your feet to the fire, the path of least resistance can't kick in as much. And you don't find yourself, sitting on the couch watching Netflix. You find yourself out there, putting out webinars, and you find yourself at meetups and, going to, real estate action groups and that sort of thing. So at the end of the day, that's number 5. And I think everybody that is in this business or listening to this, beautiful podcast, and congrats to you again, would find some familiarity in there. What do you think, Chad?
I think even Elon Musk himself, I keep using that name because I look up to him drastically. I think if you show anyone these 5 things, somewhere everyone is deficient in one of these, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you suck at it. It means you could improve. There's always the concept, and this is Coach Trevor's saying, constant and never-ending improvement. Even if you think you have these 5 things licked, I bet 1 or 2 of them can be better, and they will help you get to the next level. So, Coach, this has been fantastic. This is a 22-minute jam-packed session, but taking it to the next step, you offer this kind of coaching service at various levels. I mean, for one thing, you're on about every podcast out there, so props to you for that. If you guys want to get some more Coach Trevor, just look for Trevor McGregor in the Apple Podcast app or wherever you get your podcast. But how can these folks get in touch with you and possibly apply to work for you in the future?
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity. Yes. And again, it's really simple. People can simply go to my website, which is trevormcgregor.com, right? trevormcgregor.com. You'll find me on various social media channels. I'm not out there a ton, but for anyone that's defiantly committed to really taking their real estate to the next level, I'd love to connect. I'd love to hear more about who you are, what your background is, and how we could support you. But really, I do these podcasts because I know that people are going to take what we've talked about today, Chad, and they're not just going to go, well, that was a nice little chat with Chad and Trevor. They're going to think, okay, how does it apply to me and where can I get better? And you don't have to pick all 5 things. I say pick 1 or 2 of those things and really take inventory of where you're at and, where you want to go, and at least start with that. And the final thing I'll say is, you also want to unleash 2 things, because my personal belief is that real estate is the greatest wealth vehicle on the planet. I mean, look around at anyone with money, look around at anyone that does philanthropy at the levels that you and I and Team Quattro do. And they've made a lot of impact and a lot of income with real estate that allows them to do a lot of things. So I would ask the listener or the viewer to really check in with, where's your hunger? How bad do you want success? Are you willing to take some of the things we've talked about here today and apply it? And really check in with your passion, because I know as passionate as you are about your real estate and I am about our real estate, once you unleash that passion, more and more deals tend to find you. More and more investors tend to come to you. More and more opportunities come. And I really do believe that it comes from intentional energy that literally gives us, the ability to go out there and make this an absolutely amazing vehicle to work with. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think I need to let you have the mic drop moment here at the end of the podcast. That was beautiful, Trevor. So, and I think the thing to remember for the listeners here, like, enjoy the journey. This is a marathon, not a sprint, whatever you're doing. Like he said, don't try to master all 5 of these things at one time. Pick one, focus on it, go to the next one, focus on it in order of applicability to your situation, right? But Coach, this has been a fantastic episode, high impact, high value. Thanks for being with us today. And we will talk to you on another episode soon, if I can talk you into it.
All right. Well, we'll definitely be back. And I just want to say huge props to you, Chad, and huge props to all of Team Quattro for just absolutely going out there and changing the way real estate is done. Congrats to all of you.
Thanks, Coach. All right, everyone, over and out.
We hope this episode was insightful and brought value to your day. If so, please be awesome and leave us a 5-star review. Find out how Team Quattro can help you at thequattroway.com. Until next time, this is the Real Estate Runway Podcast.